Hello everyone, and welcome back to ISDA's 35th Annual General Meeting. It's day 2 of our flagship event, and it's been great to connect with delegates all over the world, albeit in a virtual setting. Our last AGM took place in Hong Kong in 2019, and I never would have imagined that the next one would be fully virtual. I've really missed traveling to Asia to meet with members and regulators, and I very much look forward to going to do so again when the travel restrictions ease. Now we're going to start day 2 with 2 Asia-focused panels. One looking at the approach of benchmark reform in Japan, and the other exploring developments in China's derivatives markets. Asia represents a substantial and important part of ISDA's membership, and we've always been committed to supporting the development of safe and efficient derivatives markets right across the region. Now more than ever, we recognize the enormous growth potential in Asia and are working closely with market participants on some very important issues. I'd like to start by highlighting 3 recent developments that demonstrate the focus we're placing on the region. First, in September of 2020, India's financial markets took a huge step forward with the passage of legislation on the enforceability of closeout netting. ISDA worked closely with the Indian authorities for the past several years to make this happen. As with so many other jurisdictions, netting certainty in India will set the foundations for a strong, safe, and efficient derivatives market. Second, as firms prepare for the implementation of Phase 5 and 6 of the initial margin requirements for non-cleared derivatives, market participants need to decide which assets to post as IM and understand any regulatory or legal impediments associated with them. Together with the Chinese Central Depository and Clearing Corporation, ISDA has published a white paper that analyzes issues relating to the issue of Chinese government bonds as collateral. And finally, we continue to work closely with Chinese authorities to move towards recognition of closeout netting. We're also developing a white paper that will explore the important next steps for China's derivatives markets once netting has been achieved. In my remarks today, I will explore the key areas for derivatives markets in Asia Pacific: benchmarks, closeout netting, and initial margin. Turning first to the benchmark reform. As we discussed yesterday, we now have a clear timetable for the death of LIBOR following the FCA's announcement on March 5. We know that 30 LIBOR settings will either cease or become non-representative at the end of this year, while 5 of the most popular US dollar LIBOR settings will continue until mid-2023. It's important to note that the extra 18 months of US dollar LIBOR should not be seen as a delay. In fact, some regulators, including the U.S. Federal Reserve, have said that they expect to use supervisory powers to restrict new use of U.S. dollar LIBOR from the end of 2021. That means firms should really be working towards using alternative reference rates no later than the end of this year. As big users of LIBOR and U.S. dollar LIBOR in particular, institutions in Asia cannot afford to take their foot off the pedal. Alternative rates are available, and liquidity in products referencing those rates is increasing. According to the analysis by ISDA and Claris, 8.8% of total cleared OTC exchange-traded derivatives, DV01, was linked to RFRs in March, up from 5.3% in March of 2020. But there's clearly a lot more work to be done. Just 4.7% of US dollar interest rate derivatives, DV01, was referenced to SOFR in March. When it comes to Australian dollar and Japanese yen, only 5.1% and 2.4% of total cleared interest rate derivatives, DV01, in those currencies referenced to RFRs. Ultimately, we expect liquidity in RFRs to steadily increase as we approach the end 2021 deadline. Transition milestones set by the official sector and various RFR working groups will also likely help. For example, the Cross-Industry Committee on Japanese Yen Interest Rate Benchmarks has recommended the new interest rate swaps linked to yen LIBOR with a maturity after the end of 2021 should stop by September 30th. Of course, risk-free rates aren't the only option out there. Many jurisdictions in Asia, including Australia, Hong Kong, and Japan, have opted for a multi-rate approach, with local IBORs coexisting with local currency RFRs. In some countries, like Japan, a forward-looking RFR term rate is also available. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the transition efforts in Japan in our first panel today. From our perspective, an important part of the transition is the adoption of robust fallbacks. So far, more than 13,800 firms globally, including 1,200 from Asia Pacific, have adhered to ISDA's protocol that allows firms to incorporate fallbacks into existing derivatives linked to LIBOR and other key IBORs. The protocol is still open for adherence, so I encourage you to look at this and make sure that you've reviewed the document carefully. Now, no overview of Asia Pacific would be complete without recognizing the enormous growth of China. In recent years, China has taken a major step towards liberalizing its financial markets and removing barriers to international participation. As firms from all over the world access Chinese markets, it's more important than ever that institutions can effectively manage their risk. A safe and well-functioning derivatives market is critical to allowing banks to hedge their risk that they take. In turn, this means that they can increase lending and support for the real economy, boosting the development of vibrant capital markets. Firms are willing to do business with a wider range of counterparties if they know they can hedge their risk of trading with them, encouraging greater liquidity. But let me be very clear. A functioning derivatives market requires a robust and predictable legal framework, which must include enforceability of closeout netting. By allowing parties to combine their obligations into a single payment, netting mitigates the credit risk associated with derivatives and means a default is less likely to be disruptive to the financial system. It also encourages a more active participation by foreign and domestic firms, supporting liquid and efficient capital markets. Important progress has been made in China in recent years. ISDA will continue to work closely with Chinese agencies to further advance progress on this critical issue. For now, enforceability of closeout netting in China continues to be ISDA's biggest priority in the region. But we also must think about the next steps. What needs to happen if and when netting in China is available? What further developments will be needed to promote a mature and effective derivatives market? As I mentioned earlier, ISDA is developing a white paper that will explore this very issue. The paper sets out an efficient and vibrant derivatives market will contribute to China's financial system and ultimately support economic growth. It also recommends a series of policy measures and actions to support a robust, safe, and efficient derivatives market. These include government and regulatory policies, trading practices, risk management procedures and risk governance, and market infrastructure. We will be sharing these recommendations with policymakers and market participants in the weeks ahead as we continue to support the development of a liquid and well-functioning derivative market in China. Before I finish, I'd like to say a few words about margining requirements for non-cleared derivatives. We are now just a few months away from the deadline of Phase 5 entities to begin posting IM in September of 2021. Together with Phase 6 in September of 2022, we expect a large number of firms in Asia to come into scope. As well as putting new documentation systems and processes in place, in-scope entities will need to think carefully about the collateral that they intend to post and understand the regulatory and legal impediments that may affect their choice. Given the rapid growth of China's bond market and its opening up to overseas investors, more and more firms are keen to explore the use of Chinese government bonds as initial margin. In response, ISDA has collaborated with the CCDC to consider the various legal, regulatory, and market structure issues associated with this, and we recently published a joint white paper in both Chinese and in English. ISDA has always been committed to the effective global framework for margining of non-cleared derivatives and has built the tools for market participants to achieve this. Those tools include industry documentation, the ISDA Standard Initial Margin Model, and ISDA Create for the online negotiation and execution of margin agreements. I hope this paper will also serve as a valuable tool for the many firms in Asia Pacific now preparing to implement the IM requirements. I've talked a lot about the various steps ISDA is taking to support the continued development of safe and efficient derivatives markets in Asia Pacific. While we continue to operate in the midst of the pandemic, the challenging circumstances have not slowed our progress towards working towards forthcoming deadlines and addressing market structure issues. You can count on ISDA to continue to work hard on these initiatives in the months ahead. With the rollout of vaccines around the world, I very much hope that better times in life are ahead, and we will be able to meet in person soon again. In the meantime, I'd like to thank our sponsors and our speakers, and I hope you find today's session engaging and constructive. Thank you very much.